All right. 30 seconds in. I didn't close the blinds because it looked like I live in the projects. I don't. So, tonight we're going to talk about a couple things. And one of the most important things we can discuss or consider is who we are, all right, and where we're at in life. So because if we don't know either one of those, how are you ever going to figure out where you're going to go? And more importantly, how are you going to prepare to get there? We can always have dreams and goals and aspirations, but there's always work to be done to achieve such ideas. And the beginning of both the Gylfaginning and the Skald's Karpamol to reflect a certain idea that I think bears discussion as we step into taking a look at the Voluspa, right? Because there's some real stories there that do what I do best, and that is to help people build themselves using the myths of the past, right? I mean, you get right down to it. What are we doing here if we're not trying to become better in some regard, right? And it might be to be a better father. It might be to be a better mother. It might be to be a better parent or a better, maybe you have a good job. Maybe you want to be a better employee. Maybe you have a business and you want to be a better businessman. Maybe you're trying to get sober and you're desperately looking for anything to help you not screw around with a needle or pick up a bottle. Maybe you're simply broken. Maybe your heart has been so broken that you really don't know where to go. Maybe you've been stabbed in the back by people. I hear the Canadians are real powerful on that. Online bullying seems to become the term of the day. What the fact of the matter is, there's no limit to the amount of people that will do their best to denigrate who and what you are, right? For no good reason, just simply to boost their ego and make them feel better about themselves. Nothing important, just a snide little comment here and there. That polite form of character assassination we usually call water cooler gossip, right? And there's no reason for it. But we live in a world today where we're always bombarded by that kind of perception, those ideas, right? You see, these chaps here are kind of important to me. These are my great grandfather's chaps, and they were fat. They were made on the ranch at the turn of the last century in Texas. Okay. Now, every time I look at that and I have some kind of doubt or anything like that, or I'm not sure, it always reminds me that I know for a fact that man never doubted who he was or where he was going. It was very simple. Much of it had to do with survival, but they were at the turn of the last century in the Industrial Revolution. So my great-grandfather and my grandfather, they took cattle on cattle drives to the railheads in New Mexico from Texas. This is no easy feat. You didn't find men out there that questioned who they were. Had to take action and do the thing that needed to be done. In today's world where we live, where we're constantly bombarded by other people's opinion about what we should be doing and what we should be considering, what we should be thinking about, we need to take that into consideration. And the primary gut response is to say, fuck your feelings, right? If we're constantly sabotaging our best efforts to deal with individuals who may not strive to do their best to live up to the standard, are we really making a good enough investment in ourselves to justify the time we're spending on someone that won't listen for love nor money? And that's a reality. I talked with a gentleman the other day. 9 times out of 10, when somebody calls me, the only thing they're looking for is a justification for their attitude or their behavior. I am not typically the man prone to give that. Right? I will call a spade when I see it. And I think we all should, as men and as women, call it like we see it. Never mind what anybody online says, right? So let's dive right on into building who we are. Let's figure out exactly who we are, which I think is the most important thing we can do. Who am I? Am I the collection of thoughts that run through my head? Am I the energy behind that collection of thoughts? Am I simply this material body? Am I accumulation of all the deeds I've done in the past? Well, we could call ourselves all that, and we could call ourselves less than that. We could simply say we exist. We are a spiritual being trying to survive in a physical manifestation. Okay, so what are the lessons we should be learning? Well, one of them is, who am I? Because then I begin to process who I'm going to develop into. At the beginning of the Gylfaginning, which is one of the stories of the Prose Edda, right? One of the very important stories. It's where all of the lore comes from, right? These poetic and prose Edda, right? It starts off real simple with this very same situation. This old boy trying to figure out who he is. King Gylfi ruled the land that men now call Sweden, right? All right, so he's a king, and he's a ruler, and he rules a big place. It's told of him that he gave to a wandering woman in return for her merrymaking. And I'm not going to dive into what that might mean or what it might not mean. A plow land in his realm, as much as 4 oxen might turn up in a day and a night. But this woman was a kin of the Aesir. She was named Gefjon, right? She took from the north out of Jotunheim 4 oxen, which were the soils of a certain giant, and herself had set them before the plow. And the plow cut so wide, so deep, that it loosened up the land, and the oxen drew the land out into the sea and to the westward and stopped in a certain sound where Gefjon set the land and gave it a name, calling it Sealand. And from that time, the spot which the land had been torn up as water is now called the Lover in Sweden, and bays line that lake even as the headlands in Sealand. Right? So, right off the bat, we're presented with an individual whose experience, whether we realize it or not, mirrors that of many men. He got to fooling around with a woman and lost half his shit. Plain and simple. Right? We lose our head. We're not paying attention. So everything he's built with his hands, he just lost a big chunk of it because he wanted to play the fool around game. He lost the discipline to maintain the integrity of his path and who he was. Well, I'm king. I think I can get away with anything. Maybe not so much. Right? And this woman just brought him low. Right, so here it says he was a wise man and skilled in magic. Well, it didn't help him out then, did it? So that's one of the things we need to pay attention to. Right, so he's considered himself a wise man and skilled in magic. He can make things occur according to his will, as a king, as a wise man skilled in magic, whatever that might mean. And we can go off on the same way. We can step off into the world thinking we know it all. We got it. We're on top of our game. Nothing's going to go wrong. We got this, right? And then the next thing you know, one falter, one hiccup in our step with regards to paying attention to who we are and where we're going, and we're right back at square one. Sometimes that important lesson is very necessary. It has been for me. It's very necessary in the fact that, okay, now I got to pay attention to something else because I was missing a part of the puzzle. And King Gylfi was missing a part of the puzzle as well. Much like all of us were when we jumped into this. We were missing a part of the puzzle. What should it look like? We failed to clearly define that. So now we got to bring in this other aspect of who we are, this spiritual aspect. Right? He was much troubled that the Aesir people were so cunning that all things went according to their will. So there's businessmen, and then there's businessmen. There are husbands, and then there are husbands, right? Some of them they write songs about, the rest of them are just mediocre. Is that what we want to settle for? And see, when you start identifying these things, there's a real teardown process, and it requires a real rigorous honesty about who and what we are. Yes, I failed at that. Damn, I could have done better. Okay, how'd I fix it? All right. You might consider making amends, and then you might consider not doing it anymore. That's a real important thing to consider when you're dealing with an alcoholic or a drunk or a man whore or some woman that's promiscuous or whatever. There's a certain set of emotions that cloud the judgment with regards to I might miss out on something, or I might be cool, or whatever might be happening that clouds their ability to identify who they are and keep moving forward, because there's always a rush of emotion and pheromones and serotonin and all these other things that go with that kind of behavior. that is quite literally very self-destructive, right? It ruins our ability to maintain a healthy perspective, and it takes an enormous amount of effort to get that back. He's figuring that out. Even though, well, I'm top of my game. I run the country. I ought to be like this should be going the way I think it should. But he indulged in those kind of behaviors that if we take even just a cursory glance around us, we can recognize it has ruined lives, including mine, more than once. That's a shameful thing to admit, isn't it? That, hey, this guy's failed. Well, shit, yeah, I failed. How else do we figure out, how do we gain wisdom? For me, it takes a real swift kick in the nuts, right? And I've had more than one. But it's always that desire driven by our ego to be more, to enjoy more, to feel more, to experience happiness and joy and have a good time and be considered cool the whole time we're doing it. He pondered whether this might proceed from their own nature or whether the divine powers which they worshipped might ordain such things. So just like everybody else that goes through the ringer, at some point, they're going to start looking for something else. I got to have something to help me out. In my own story, I remember having been a very successful business owner, making more money than most people would even can fathom. Right? But at the end of all that, after I'd indulged in behaviors just trying to have fun, right? Instead of staying on the path and maintaining my focus and really becoming something what I wanted to be, I began to be aware of a wall. And it's just like Master Chim says, what got you here may not get you there. And I became very aware of that. Instead of grabbing that and applying the pressure to become something more, like tempering steel for a sword, I decided, well, I'm pretty comfortable where I'm at. I'll just have a good time here. That's not how life works. So when I decided I needed to find some kind of help, some kind of hope, somebody to stick a hand out and say, come on, brother, I got you. And I go to church. When I sit in the back row, I didn't have the fancy breeches. I didn't have the cool shirt. I sat there and cried like a girl, like a baby, right? Because I'd lost everything. There was no one there to shake my hand. I sat in the back because I didn't have that $1,000 seed of faith donation to give. So I had to find something new. And as I read the intro to that, I began to realize this may be tens of thousands of years old, an oral tradition. And yet it's a real clear evidence that no one's created any new emotions. We're all firing in the same pattern. To varying degrees or extremes or whatever, what might have you, those emotions are the same. Fear and love. And they drive 90% of what we try to do. So he decided he's going to go check this out. But he's not going to go in there honestly. He's not going to go in there as a man saying, hey, I fell on my face and I could use a little help. I'm not sure where I went wrong. Could you maybe help me out with this? Well, having fallen on my face, I have kind of a clear indication of that. That's the whole reason I do this, is to kind of show people, okay, there's a path here that might work for you if you are able to be honest with yourself about things. All right? So he set on his way to Asgard, going secretly, and clad himself in the likeness of an old man. So he's not going to go up there as who he is. He's going to try to be sneaky and kind of garner some off the edges without really being honest about what's going on in the world. What's really going on with him. He's going to sneak in there pretending to be something that he's not. But the Aesir were wiser, and everybody always is. I don't care how you paint yourself up. If you're in the middle of that, it's coming off of you. It's radiating off of you like sunshine in the night. Right? Everyone knows what's going on. It's no secret. Everybody thinks they're cool and they're getting away with something. No, you're not. Your family knows. Your children know. Your parents worry. Your brother and sister want nothing to do with you. Those things are a reality. People see that stuff and they know exactly, he's going through it. And then they want to shy away, because at that point, when we're in those kind of thought processes, mindset, we're going to pretend to be something else, and we're going to try to take as much as we can and not really give anything in return. I never did. So they saw his journeying before he ever came. And that's usually the way it is. If somebody shows up with a broken heart or a broken bank account or an addiction or some kind of struggle, then finally they say, hey, can you, I'm not sure what's going on. Could you help me out? And I think that's what 90% of the people in the world want. Just the realization that if I look up, there's going to be something there to give me a hand. There's something that's going to inspire me, something that's going to help me put one foot in front of the other and keep trying. Because at this point, we have no idea who we are, and we have no idea where we're going. This is an act of faith. And I don't care what spirituality or religion you are in, the reality of it is it is an act of faith. To take that first step in the direction, being willing to give up some aspect of ourselves that we've held onto as being the most important part of who we are. I'm a victim. I have been abused. I have been beat up. I have been cheated on. I have been this. I have been that. And the best case I ever saw of it was I was standing in a Dollar General at Christmas time in Oklahoma. A lady walked in. A lady behind me said, hi, how are you doing? And before the woman said anything, she said, I lost my husband just before Christmas. Not hi, hello, fuck you, or nothing. It's just the immediate, I'm a victim. Give me some attention. And people get stuck in that. The analogy I've always used is like the knot on the tree. When the roots and the tree trunk and the leaves are all working together, energy comes out of the ground. It goes up through the trunk. It flows through. It goes to the leaf and it moves out as oxygen. It gives us life. It takes in carbon dioxide and gives off oxygen. And we share a planet with that. And it allows us to live. Occasionally, a knot forms in that tree. And much like us and our emotions that flow through us like water, we form a knot, a big scar around whatever pain happened to hit us. And no material flows through there. And our development stops at that knot. I've seen people that have been victims all of their life. And sometimes we got to break that down. This is an example of how this king is breaking it down. First, he tries to disguise himself. I don't want to admit that I have this problem. I don't want to admit that I'm really going through this. I don't want anybody to know that I'm hurting. And that everybody around him knows. They always know. When he came into the town, he saw there a hall so high that he could not easily make out the top of it. Its thatching was laid with golden shields after the fashion of a shingled roof. So in the hallway, Gylfi saw a man juggling with ann laces, having 7 in the air at the one time. The man asked of his name. He said he called himself Gangleri and said he had come by the paths of the serpent and prayed for lodging for the night, asking who owned the hall. So, first thing he sees is a juggling act. Anytime we start to change the path of our life, or the foundation of our spiritual experience, foundation of our spiritual being, in today's world, when we open ourselves up to that broad, grand, new horizon of spiritual exploration, which we have done here, there's no limit to what other things might catch our attention. I don't care if it's Bigfoot or aliens or flat earth or moon landing was fake or any of that other nonsense people want to talk about all the time as if it makes them important. So this is where the real danger lies in changing the foundation of your spiritual experience. Because we find 7 or 8 people online that agree with us, and all of a sudden, well, I must be right. And then they go about the world. They've not moved past that point. They've made 2 little baby steps and got stuck in a rabbit hole. They've been distracted by the thatched roof, the shingled roof, and the juggling ann laces, and they've been sucked off into a rabbit hole of whatever kind of thing people want to talk about. And it runs the gamut. If you look at the social justice warriors or the liberal left, there's a whole litany of things. The environment's collapsing as far as they're concerned. If you look at the far right or the far left, says, oh, the far right's all Nazis. If you look at the far left, the liberals are destroying the world. We got people pooping in the street in California, right? People begin to confuse these feelings of righteous indignation as if they might be the benefit of this new spiritual endeavor. and they don't go past that point. And I think that's a real shame. I think that's a real travesty. I also think it's a fine filter. Those individuals still have things to deal with to take that exploration a step further. If I waste my time on those individuals, I'm wasting my time on individuals who are actively acting like losers, not willing to go beyond the righteous indignation that they've confused for a spiritual experience. There's a lot of energy in it, a lot of anger. Every time you see a mob in the street, it's putting off anger into the atmosphere. Somebody's feeding off that. Somebody's sitting at home watching TV, getting just mad enough to shit standing up because those people are in the street. They're feeding off that anger. It happens in millions of homes every night when they watch the news. People are sitting there feeding off that anger, being righteously indignant and going with it. Well, I must be right. So this path of the serpent by which he came is not a straightforward path through the thick brush. It's not the straightforward path of clearing away the wreckage of the past. It's not a straightforward path of taking that road that other people are too afraid to travel. It's the path of the serpent, which is every bit as winding as the river, which takes the path of least resistance. So he's disguised himself to go find this spiritual experience, and he's tried to do it the sneakiest way possible, the path of least resistance. So this is not an individual that's committed to growth. This is not an individual who is committed to, well, he doesn't know what he's committed to because he thought he had it figured out and he just lost half his shit. Anytime someone shows up here, whether they realize it or not, they're in that same boat. And it's such an important concept that it's not told once, but it's told twice. A certain man named Eger or Lear, he dwelt on the island which is now called Lear's Isle. Leso is what it is, and was deeply versed in black magic. So here's also an individual who, instead of going out, and I want you to understand about the use of magic with these individuals. These are not individuals that will go out and do it by their own hand. They're going to get power from somewhere else to accomplish things they can't do on their own. Magic in this case is the ego. They think themselves much greater than they really are because I can do this spell, I can change things, I can make myself rich, and I can control that individual over there, and I can make that person love me, and I can talk to the dead, and all these wonderful things that we assign to magic. What it is, in reality, is somebody sitting there thinking they're greater than they really are. That's the ego. And I hear it all the time. Well, you need a little bit of ego. No, you don't. Number one, you're not qualified to handle it. Very rarely is an individual qualified to handle their ego. And it's, in the Christian's term, it means edging God out. For us, it's edging the gods out. It's mean, I'm not going to pay attention to that example. I've got this figured out, and that's exactly the kind of individual that is most susceptible to indulging in righteous indignation as a part of their spiritual, that they've confused for their spiritual experience. See the trap? Well, King Gilfy's been trapped in that right off the bat. And they know he's coming. So what do they got to do? Same thing they got to do here with Lear. He took his way to Asgard, but the Aesir had foreknowledge of his journey. Once again, everybody knows what's going on. Everybody can see it clear as a bell. You know, it's like people get divorced. They walk around and feel like they got the word fool written on their forehead. Well, maybe they do. The expressions on their face, their actions, their mindset, everything they do is tell them, I am in enormous pain. I don't know what to do with. And they always wait for some kind of magic to make it go away. See, in this society, you can be angry. It's okay to be, it's acceptable to be angry. And all these people are using that anger as fuel to make it through the day. Watch them come in on Monday morning. I'm angry today, and you just need to stay away from me because I'm angry. And if I'm angry, I'm dangerous, and you just don't need to fool with me. You see it a lot. I've seen it a lot. Never can stand those guys. Walking around. I'm the baddest son of a gun in here, and I'm not going to talk to you because I'm important and you're not. You're okay, buddy. You keep on thinking that. Both these men thought that as they approached Asgard. And the gods knew they were full of shit like a Christmas turkey. He was received with good cheer, yet many things were done by deceit with eye illusions. And at evening, when it was time for drinking, Odin had swords brought into the hall so bright that light radiated from them, and other illumination was not used while they sat there drinking. So now you got a real demonstration in front of you. Holy shit. Both of these men have snuck in there trying to think they're going to get a little bit of that. And both men got hit with this powerful deception that blew their lips off. You got glowing swords that provide light. You got a huge shingled roof and holy man, people juggling and all kinds of entertainment. And there was stuff going on over here and stuff going on over there. Lear gets the full dose of it. Right? Then the Aesir came into the banquet. And in the high seats sat down those 12 Aesir who were appointed to be judges. Right? So this is important to consider. These were their names: Thor, Njord, Frey, Tyr, Heimdall, Bragi, Vidar, Vali, Uller, Honir, Loki. And in the like manner, the Aesir: Frigg, Freya, Gefjon, Idun, Gerder, Sigan, Fulla, and Nanna. And it seemed glorious to the eager to look about him in the hall, the wainscotings that were hung with fair shields. There was also stinging mead copiously quaffed, and the man seated next to Aegir was Bragi, and they took part together in drinking and in converse. And Bragi told many of the things which had come to pass among the Aesir. So it continued. Huge, beautiful wall hangings with shields and plenty of drink and shining lights and literal gods and goddesses. Imagine being a homeless person going to a Hollywood elite party. You get the same kind of idea. Right? This is what he's experiencing right now. Same thing with Gylfi. Right? I will attend to thee to see him, right, to see the king. Then shalt thou thyself ask him concerning his name. And the man wheeled about before him into the hall, and he went afar, and straightway the door closed itself on his heels. There he saw a great room and much people, some with games, some drinking, and some had weapons and were fighting. Then he looked about him and thought unbelievable many things which he saw, and he said, all the gateways ere one goes out should one scan, for it is uncertain where sit the unfriendly on the bench before thee. He saw 3 high seats, each above the other, and the 3 men sat thereon, one on each. And he asked them their names, Har. And the next one, his name is Yanhar. He who was uppermost is called Thridi. So both of these men snuck in here and got their lips blown off by what it could really be. And I think when we sit down and start asking ourselves where we are in life, and we read this first little intro into these 2 great poems, right? We find a way to identify with that. But in that also, we begin to see something we can expect by an association with these divine beings. But they know that they're trying to lie to get in. One of the most bravest things I ever saw was when my grandfather passed away. And I've told this story many times, and I'll probably tell it many times more. He was lying in bed, and the hospice nurse was like, Carl, do you want, his name was Carl Gocher. He said, do you want to speak to a priest? No. And then she asked him again, and my mom was taking care of him, helping take care of him at the time. And she said, Carl, do you want me to call the pastor to come over so you can talk to him? And he thought about it. He said, yeah, okay. Right? And the day came not long before he died. And the pastor called to see if he should come over. And she said, Carl, it's the pastor. Do you want him to come over? And he sat there and he thought about it for a minute, Mama said. And then he looked at her and he said, no, I don't believe I do. If I'm going to get into heaven, I'm going to get in it on what I've done. I'm not going to try to get into it on a lie. This is a man that's dying. This is a man who will be dead in a couple of days. To enter into the next beyond whatever may happen with that kind of courage, this is a man who understood who he was. Just like my other great-grandfather, a man that knew who he was. Right? They're not going to get in on a lie. We're going to get in on what we've done and what we can do. but they knew who they were. And that's the most important thing about all of this is figuring out who we are. Because there's a literal shaping of the world and the universe and the description of how it is a cycle and everything else. And it's easy to get lost in that. But if we can't figure out how to figure out who we are in the beginning and come at it with rigorous honesty, we're setting ourselves up to be victims of our own ego and the righteous indignation that comes with it. And I know there's a lot of intelligent individuals that have read a lot of books. And many of the books that I've seen are wildly inappropriate and inaccurate. Because you got to ask yourself whenever you're reading something, how does that help me live a better life? And in the next, when we go into Patreon, I'm going to go over the Veluspa and I'm going to explain some of those things that are routinely confused by people that make no sense and don't look like they offer any kind of help to someone trying to live a better life. At the end of the day, that's what we're going for here. It's just like I always say, if you want to be that person that walks down the street and somebody says, hey, I want someone that guy's working in my life, that's when you work with me. That's when you come in here and pay attention to the things I've got to say and begin to adopt some of the ideas. Not because I said them, but because they might work in your life. If they don't, cast them out. I don't give a shit. But if they do, put them together and see what happens. All right? Is everything going to be hunky-dory? I don't know. It might get worse. It has for me many times. But I didn't give up. And I think that's the most important thing here. So they didn't give up. There's a whole book here talking all the tales that they've told him. Great and wonderful and powerful and terrible things. And it put him in his place. It put both of them in their place, realizing, maybe I ain't all that. And both these old boys walked up to Asgard thinking they were all that in a bag of chips because they were skilled in magic. It's like a Green Bay Packers fan wearing a Packers jersey going to a Vikings game. He thinks he's got all that because I'm a cheesehead, right? Well, over here, you ain't shit. It's trying to claim that association of greatness without ever having done anything to achieve it. So he answers this and he talks about everything. So you have Bragi. Bragi starts answering all these things. In the Gylfaginning, it is Odin, right? The three phases of Odin, right? High, equally high, and third. Where is this God, or what power hath he, or what hath he wrought that is a glorious deed? Har made answer. He lives throughout all ages and governs all his realms and directs all things, great and small. He fashioned heaven and earth and air and all things which are in them. And then spake the third, greatest of all is this, that he made man and gave him the spirit, which shall live and never perish. Though the flesh frame wrought to mold or burn to ashes, all men shall live, such as are just in action, and be with himself in the place called Gimli. All men shall live, and such as are just in action. So if he wasn't paying attention to that comment, he probably should have been. If we are just in our action, if we attempt to do right, if we are honest with ourselves, this is the key to being able to exist and make the kind of decision that my grandfather did on his deathbed. Shouldn't that be the goal? Should we try to move somewhere into the next world based on a lie? Well, why should we be doing it now? And that's the real question we've got to ask ourselves when we decide to change the foundation of our spiritual existence. Why should I try to live a lie now? Why can't I go and try to be great as I can possibly be using these principles? But evil men go to hell, and that's down to the misty hell, right? Niflheim. And that is down in the ninth world, right? This goes into the creation after this, and that's probably something we will talk about next week. Insofar as Lear is concerned, Bragi sat down with him and starts telling him another story. He starts telling him about how Loki was angered and snatched up a pole and brandished it with all his strength and drove it at the eagle's body. And the eagle plunged and took him and drug him across the top of the trees and then captured him. And then Loki traded off something that wasn't his for his own security, much like this man who is skilled in magic would do. He would trade off something that wasn't his for his own well-being. Doesn't matter what it does to the people around him. Now, he perceived that as his well-being, but it wasn't his to give. And we do the same thing throughout our lives. We make sacrifices of things that are not ours to sacrifice, so other people might suffer, so we can boost our ego, or we can continue to act as fools. These are the things that are important to work on. And this is what I mean when I say we got to know who we are and where we are. We will never get to where we want to go. It will be a constant cycle of creation, destruction, righteous indignation, boost of our ego, some kind of destruction, a victim mindset, righteous indignation, a boost of our ego, a destruction, a victim mindset, a little so on and so on and so on and so on. So these tales, which are the foundation, these tales and every other pagan belief is what the Bible was created from. The entirety of the Bible is plagiarized from much older pagan sources. All of it. Every single story in it. Except for the fact that now, with that, somebody else is going to do it for you. Well, you don't have to do anything. Ask and it'll be given, and you'll be taken care of. You don't have to change a thing and continue on the way you were. We're living in a world where that's no longer a reality. That's why these ancient tales are back in the forefront of millions of people. Billions, if you count the Hindus and the Shinto of Japan. They're pagan. Ain't nobody fool with them for a reason. And now as we try to reclaim our ancestral spiritual heritage, it becomes very apparent that these things are every bit as pertinent today as they were 10,000 years ago. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. In the meantime, I'm going to shut it down and get ready for Patreon, where I'm going to go over the Voluspa and discuss how they set everything up and what it means and the kind of things we can use to adopt for our life, what really makes sense and what really doesn't. All right. So I look forward to, if you're going to join me on Patreon, I hope you do. Come on in. We'd be happy to have you. Come in there for 90 days. And if your life don't change, I'll be very surprised. Right. All right. Y'all have a good night. Thank you.